The moment she walked in, the air in the room changed. This was the kind of place that you could only enter with a membership, where business cards and surnames silently shouted, and the successes carved into the walls were visible even in the dim light. Every table held the traces of history. The sound of stones gently tapping the wood seemed to tell the story of years of strategy. Those with wrinkled shirts didn't get past this door. Women here were either invited or invisible. But that day, the woman who walked through the door was neither invited nor invisible. She was an exception. Anna wore a plain white dress, neither branded nor fashionable. It ended just above her knees, held in place by a leather belt worn with time. Her hair was tightly pulled back, with no fancy pin, no jewelry. She didn't even carry a bag. The moment she stepped in, everyone inside eyed her like a mistake in the decor. Every step she took seemed to slap the ears in the silence. The crystal chandelier in the hall cast not a shadow, but curiosity upon her. She walked between the tables and sat in a small corner, a chair no one would bother with. Her eyes focused on the game, the arrangement of the pieces, the speed of the moves, the tremors in the players' hands. Only one person was watching her closely, the club's undefeated champion for 7 years, Philip, who had established his dominance with cold stares and considered the chair he sat in his throne. Philip, as always, dazzled in his dark blue suit and cufflinks shaped like custom chess pieces. He was the living legend of this club. And that day, he thought, a new prey had entered the room. He smiled, but it wasn't a smile. It was the beginning of a plan. "Who is this woman?" he asked, turning to Charles beside him. "I don't know," Charles said, unconcerned. "Maybe a cleaner, or someone who entered by mistake." Philip shook his head, but didn't take his eyes off Anna. He could always tell when someone was observing. She wasn't just watching, she was analyzing. It was as if she knew the language of the pieces, and that intrigued him. In that moment, he decided, "We need some entertainment tonight, don't we?" He stood up. Every step he took caused whispers to ripple through the crowd. Philip approaching a stranger was always an event. Other members turned their heads, curious about the newcomer. Many looked down on her because of her clothing, her demeanor, her silence. But a few, when they saw Philip's familiar hunter expression, already knew what he was about to do. When Philip reached the seat where Anna was sitting, he paused in the middle of the game she was watching. "Did you like the view?" he asked. Anna looked up. There was neither surprise nor fear in her eyes. "Not bad," she said simply. "Care for a game of chess?" Philip's voice was coated in subtle mockery. "A little," Anna replied. Philip's smile widened. "How nice," he murmured. A few people around them started giggling, already predicting what was about to happen. "Philip Stein," he said, extending his hand. "I've been the champion here for 7 years." "Anna," she replied. She didn't even feel the need to say her last name. Philip winked. "Nice to meet you. Since you enjoy watching, maybe we should play a game? It'll be fun." "Thank you, but I'm waiting for someone," Anna said, her eyes returning to the board. Philip's smile thinned. The game had started. "Just one game," he insisted. "Maybe there are a few tricks you need to learn." Anna's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "One game," she said softly. "But just one." And in that moment, the atmosphere in the club changed. First came curiosity, then came expectation. Everyone started gathering, eager to see how this ordinary woman would be humiliated. But no one knew yet. In this story, the last person who would smile would be the humblest one. As Anna walked to the table, the atmosphere in the club thickened. People weren't talking, but their gazes said everything. A moment of excitement, a minute of courage, their eyes seemed to say. Some were eagerly awaiting Philip's famous first blood move. This table was where the arrogance of newcomers clashed with the patience of masters. The chessboard on the table was perfectly set up. On the shiny marble surface, the pieces were arranged like soldiers before a battle. As Anna sat in front of the white pieces, Philip took his place across from her with the black pieces. "Ladies first," he said with fake elegance. Anna's movements were calm. Her eyes moved over the pieces, then carefully pushed a pawn forward. E4, a classic and safe opening. But the determination in the way she placed the piece didn't escape the notice of those paying attention. Philip, as confident as ever, moved his queen's knight to F6. A bit unconventional, but that was his style, attention-grabbing, provocative, and quick. His gaze lingered on Anna, waiting for a sign of hesitation. He expected to see some discomfort, but Anna's face remained almost expressionless. Interesting choice, Anna said softly but steadily. Early risks bring early lessons. Philip's eyebrows furrowed slightly. There was something about that sentence. It was unpretentious but not without meaning. Among the silent spectators, there was a stir. A few observant viewers, sensing something wasn't right from the first moves, were now paying closer attention. In her next moves, Anna brought her knight to c3, then moved her bishop to b5, trapping Philip's knight with check. The strategy behind the moves was immediately noticed by the experienced eyes of those watching. These weren't moves made by someone who just played a bit. Philip paused for a moment. He usually fed off his opponent's lack of confidence, but Anna's eyes were focused solely on the board. It was as if she had withdrawn into her own world, where only the pieces and possibilities existed. Your mentor taught you a few basics, Philip said with a slightly condescending expression. Anna didn't respond. When it was her turn, she quietly moved her pawn to open the path for her bishop. The game had now taken on a completely different tone. The audience, expecting a show, had slowly started paying real attention. On the board, it was a tactical war. And Anna wasn't just resisting, she was guiding the game. In less than 20 minutes, the mood in the club had completely shifted. Whispers began, and some members had abandoned their own games to gather around this table. The first bead of sweat on Philip's forehead wasn't just from the heat. For someone like him, the threat wasn't just in the pieces, it was in his pride. Anna, on the other hand, played almost breathlessly. Maybe she didn't belong to this world, but she certainly belonged to this board. Every move she made carried the trace of the past. Years of games played, perhaps even secretly played, in countless matches. And then the moment came. Check, Anna said quietly, attacking diagonally with her bishop. Philip instinctively leaned back. This wasn't just a move. This was the moment when all the balances on the board were rewritten. The crowd around them fell silent at first. Then murmurs began among them. Who is this woman? Where did she learn this? Philip is on defense for the first time. But the most surprised person was Philip himself. For the first time, someone wasn't just standing tall against him, they were pushing him into the corners of the board. They were disrupting his playing style, anticipating his moves. Now, this wasn't just a match. This was a challenge. Quiet, unpretentious, but inevitable. And for the first time, Philip truly had to play. As the hours passed, the silence around the game seemed to settle like a heavy blanket. Club members had left their tables, the waiters slowed their steps, and even the woman at the reception had her eyes fixed on the strange game. What had started as a quick entertainment now turned into a duel that everyone watched with growing curiosity. With every move, it wasn't just the pieces that clashed, it was egos. Anna said check again. The simplicity in her voice was in sharp contrast to the impact she was making on the board. It wasn't a grand or challenging tone. In fact, it might have been too humble. But it was so sincere, so confident, that everyone in the room felt a tremor with those two words. The lines between Philip's brows were now clear. Not just because the game was getting harder, but because it was slipping out of his control. What he was used to was his opponent's predictability, and his ability to manipulate that. But Anna, she played differently. There was no ego display, no unnecessary defenses. It was as if she wasn't just playing chess. She was telling the story of the game. One move, then another. The crowd had become like a single body. No one was even breathing. When Philip lost his queen, his lips parted for a brief moment. But he said nothing. What could he say? He had made a mistake on the board, something that almost never happened to him. And this mistake had been punished by a woman, an unknown woman, with no past and a silent voice. Checkmate, Anna said, as casually as if she had said good afternoon. The silence that echoed in the hall felt like a kind of ritual. No one clapped. No one moved from their seat, because no one immediately understood what had just happened. Philip's king stood alone in the center of the board. There was no place to run, no pieces left to save him. And Anna, without a hint of arrogance, began returning the pieces to their starting positions. Philip's voice was shaky and hoarse. This was unexpected. Anna looked him in the eyes, for the first time making direct eye contact. The loser usually says that, she said. There was no mockery, no mercy, just truth. A few people in the crowd smiled involuntarily. Some, watching Philip's humiliation, felt a sense of pleasure. Because this man had defeated people not just in games, but in spectacles. Now, He was the one humiliated in the middle of the show. As Anna got up from her chair, someone who had been forgotten until that moment entered the room, Dr. Martin. The gray-haired, kind-faced man's eyes lit up when he saw Anna in the crowd. "Ah, I should have expected to find you here," he said. Anna nodded slightly. "I played a game with Philip while I waited." Dr. Martin paused for a moment, glancing at Philip, then at the board. He studied the arrangement of the chess pieces, tracing a series of moves backward. Then he smiled gently. "Yes, this looks familiar." Philip furrowed his brows when he heard those words. "Do you know her?" "She was my student once," Martin said in his usual calm tone. "But she's long since become my master." A murmur spread through the crowd. She was his student? Is this woman someone famous? Did this really happen? But for Anna, these whispers meant nothing. She had fought for years to break free from them. Now, she had simply played a real game. And it wasn't the victory itself that brought her peace, but the silence behind it. Philip tried to speak again, his voice quieter this time. "I'd like a rematch." Anna turned and paused for a moment. "There's a rule in chess, Mr. Stein," she said. "The loser thanks the winner first, then asks for a rematch." Philip bowed his head. This was perhaps the first time he had done such a thing. "Thank you," he said slowly. "And the rematch?" Anna looked at Dr. Martin. He nodded slightly. "Okay," Anna said. "But this time, with a condition." A curious silence rose from the crowd. Everyone was eager to hear what she would say. "Let's make a bet," Anna said. "If you win, I'll tell you who I am, where I learned, why I stopped playing for years, everything. But if I win..." Philip's eyes were on her, watching carefully. "What do you want?" Anna smiled. A light smile, but meaningful. "You will never again look down on any foreigner who enters this club." Philip was about to roll his eyes, but something stopped him. Perhaps he sensed he was on the verge of learning something new. "Deal," he said. And so, the pieces began to be set up again for the second match. But this time, it wasn't just the pieces that were shifting. Everyone's perception in the room was changing as well. Before the second match began, the atmosphere in the room had become even heavier. Now, it wasn't just the club members, the waiters, security staff, and even a few former members who had finished their shift that day had returned. Whispers had spread from ear to ear. Philip Stein was checkmated by a woman and is asking for a rematch. But this time, the audience wasn't just there to have fun. This time, they were there to witness something. Because now, it wasn't just a game. It was a battle that revealed the characters of two people. Philip had the white pieces this time. "If you'll allow me," he said, as though it were a gesture of chivalry. But everyone knew his real intention, to take control and apply pressure. He made his opening move firmly, e4. Anna sat across from him, her eyes fixed on the board, as if she didn't hear the murmurs around her. To her, silence spoke just as much as the pieces on the board. When her opponent made his move, she silently responded by pushing her pawn to d6, a simple but masterful defense. The first few moves seemed ordinary, but those watching closely could see that beneath the simplicity, great calculations were at play. Every piece represented a history, a habit. Philip was aggressive. He rapidly moved his knights, gathering his pieces in the center, narrowing the playing field and applying pressure. This was his trusted tactic, to suffocate the opponent. Anna, however, was uncharacteristically calm. Her moves weren't reactions, they were invitations. She opened up space, testing her opponent's impatience. By the middle of the game, a few observant eyes had figured it out. Anna was using the trap Philip had set for himself. "This game, where did you learn it?" Philip asked, not taking his eyes off the board. "From life," Anna replied, not looking up. This simple answer left a mark in Philip's mind. Because in this game, the chessboard had become more than just a battlefield. It had become a metaphor. For him, success, titles, and superiority. For Anna, balance, thought, and freedom. When Philip moved his queen into play, the crowd let out a collective sigh. It was a risky move, but it was the kind of move he was used to. Anna didn't respond immediately. She looked at the board for a while. The silence stretched so long that one of the spectators almost thought the clock had malfunctioned. Then, she reached out and moved just one piece. A small pawn. But that move set off a chain that would completely disrupt Philip's entire arrangement. One piece, then another, like a domino effect, everything began to unravel. Dr. Martin, standing on the edge of the crowd, hands clasped behind his back, was watching. There was a faint pride on his face. For him, this game wasn't just about an old student's success. It was the quiet validation of a truth he had been trying to teach for years. "Check," Anna said again, this time with more conviction in her voice. Philip wiped the sweat from his forehead. Time was running out. His clock had dipped below 5 minutes, while Anna still had 11 minutes left. With every move, he felt more and more cornered. This was no longer a battle of strategies. It was the agony of surrender. This can't be a coincidence," he muttered to himself. "You're no amateur." Anna looked up at him. Those who don't take their games seriously always think every loss is a coincidence. With one final move, Philip tried to find a way out. But the pieces were no longer moving where he wanted them to go. They were moving to the places Anna had planned. And then, the anticipated moment arrived. Anna pushed her queen forward, supporting it with her bishop, trapping Philip's king. It was an unconventional move, but it had a definitive result. "Checkmate," Anna said, almost like a whisper. But those words echoed in the room like the sound of a bell. Philip sat motionless. Then, slowly, he toppled his king. The silence in the room was as heavy as a memorial service. People didn't even know what to applaud. They just stared. Anna stood up. She didn't extend her hand. She didn't wait. She simply reminded him of what she had said. "We had an agreement, Mr. Stein." Philip nodded. "It's over. I won't insult anyone with the game again in this club. I promise." At that moment, someone from the back whispered, but the whisper spread throughout the room. "Who is this woman? Who is she really?" Dr. Martin stepped forward. Perhaps some of you remember. Anna Muller, the young woman who made it to the finals of the International Championship when she was 15. The lost star of the chess world. Some of the older members' eyes widened. Some brought their hands to their mouths. Her. But Anna shook her head. "That person was once me. But now, I am just a teacher. Chess now has a place in the silence of my life." And in that moment, everyone understood who the true victor was. Because she wasn't just someone who won a game. She was someone who could control her pride, accept her past, and walk peacefully in the present. As Anna and Dr. Martin left the room, everyone parted to let them through. Not just to pass, but as a sign of respect. Then the doors closed. But inside, it wasn't just a game that had ended. The ego of an era had also come to an end. As the heavy doors of the club slowly closed behind Anna and Dr. Martin, those left inside looked at each other. Astonishment, admiration, and shame, all of them hung in the room like a silent echo. Philip Stein, however, had not moved from his seat. He placed his hand next to the fallen king and stared at the board with vacant eyes. In that moment, he realized how a simple event, like the fall of a piece, could shatter a person's entire pride. Outside, a cool breeze greeted Anna and Martin. Cars passed by, people walked, but around them, there was an invisible halo of silence. For a while, no one spoke. Only the sound of their footsteps echoed against the stone pavement. Finally, Dr. Martin asked in a soft voice, "Did you really never think about going back? To the stage, to the tournaments?" Anna shook her head. Her eyes were fixed on some distant point, as if gazing at a far corner of the past. "Once, chess was everything to me," she said. "It was like breathing. Every piece was a thought, every move a feeling. As a child, when I sat at the board, I felt at home." Martin was silent, allowing her to speak. "Then I started winning," Anna continued. "The prizes came, sponsors, interviews. It all happened so fast. Suddenly, I found myself surrounded by people's expectations. Chess was no longer a refuge for me. It became a stage. Every move I made had a purpose, to influence others." A sadness flickered in her eyes. "One day, during a match, I looked at the board and felt nothing. No passion, no curiosity, just emptiness. That was the moment I realized the game was over for me." Martin nodded, remembering. The letter Anna had sent when she withdrew from the championship finals still lingered in his mind. It had been short, formal, and heartbreakingly final. "And you left," Martin said quietly. Anna smiled faintly. "I left. I didn't touch a chess piece again. For years, I rebuilt my life. I had students. I taught mathematics. I found a different rhythm to life. And now?" Martin asked, with a hint of curiosity. Anna shrugged. "Now chess is mine again. But only mine. No trophies, no applause, just me and my board. To be able to play again, I had to find silence first." Martin looked into her eyes and felt a deep respect. It wasn't losing passion that was truly powerful, it was being able to return it to its purest form. You changed something today at the club, he said. Not just Philip's perspective. Maybe everyone's. Anna chuckled lightly. With one game. No, Martin said. With a life. They walked for a while longer, the breeze gently rustling the edges of their clothes. As they disappeared into the night, Anna's steps were light. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her. Now, the past wasn't a chain, but a memory. And chess. Chess was still there. But it was no longer a spectacle, it was a love letter. The heavy doors of the club didn't stay closed for long that night. Inside, people were still trying to make sense of what had happened. No one had expected such a powerful impact from a game as silent as chess. Philip Stein, however, was still in his seat. He sat at the board, his eyes fixed on the pieces, reliving those moments over and over again. This time, his thoughts weren't about victory. Astonishment, shame, then acceptance. His mind was under the influence of slow realizations, not the usual quick moves. Why hadn't a piece moved? Why hadn't he noticed Anna's trap? But most of all, why had he underestimated her? As these questions swirled around in his mind, he did something. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. This was the first time he had written a loss in the notebook he'd only ever used for victories. But it wasn't just the score, it was a lesson. The greatest checkmate of pride is silence. As Philip wrote this line, he felt a little lighter. The game had been lost, but perhaps this final match had been the most meaningful game of his life. The next day, the club was quiet, but the atmosphere was different. Members, while talking about their own matches, began to discuss mistakes more than victories. Older members remembered Anna's name, and the legends of her disappearance resurfaced. But there was a difference. This time, the legend carried humility, not pride. That morning, a new notice was posted on the club's bulletin board. A silver-framed plaque. True mastery is not in victory. It lies in preserving the spirit of the game. For the first time in this hall, the power of silence has won. There was no signature, no photo, but everyone knew who had written it. Philip, meanwhile, quietly continued his transformation. He now watched the new members carefully, inviting them into conversations instead of throwing out the arrogant words he used to. Sometimes, he would ask them a question, sometimes just listen. One day, a young girl who had just joined the club caught his attention. She was standing shyly at the edge of the table, too hesitant to even touch the pieces. Philip walked over to her, smiled. "Would you like to play a game?" The girl looked up in surprise. "I don't know much about chess." Philip shook his head. "Neither did I, when I started." At that moment, some of the older members exchanged glances. This was real change, quiet, slow, but irreversible. Anna, on the same day, was in another city. In a small elementary school classroom, she wrote 3-digit numbers on the board and guided her students through math problems. On her desk, there was a piece, a white knight. One of the students raised their hand. "What's this, teacher?" Anna smiled. "It was very important once. Now it reminds me of the beauty of thinking." A student raised their finger. "Teacher, have you ever been a champion?" Anna didn't answer. She simply turned back to the class and wrote a new problem on the board. Because now, the title of champion was no longer a past title for her. It was hidden in the work she put in every day. That evening, when she returned home, she sat at her small desk. She took out her old pieces, set up a small board. She placed an invisible opponent across from her, didn't set the clock. Nothing would be recorded. She made her first move, and smiled, because some victories are won with silence. And some mastery is carried, not just in sight, but in the heart. If this story moved you, if you felt the power of silence and understood that true mastery isn't in showmanship, but in simplicity, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Because every story is another way of reminding ourselves who we are. And sometimes, the quietest characters leave the deepest marks. See you in the next inspiring story.